Hello, dreamers, and welcome to Dreaming Isle. I'm here to guide you into a calm and magical place tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps bring more dreamers to our little corner of the stars. And if you'd like, share in the comments, what's the world outside your window like right now? Quiet night? Rainy? City lights? Now, find your cozy spot. Let go of the day and let the story begin. The Last Ember of Lorianth, Part 1. The Dragon Beneath the Moonvine Tree. Far in the misted valleys, where the sky hung low and the stars whispered to the leaves, there slept a dragon unlike any other. His name was Lorianth, and he was old, not in the brittle, fading way of forgotten things, but in the deep, rooted way of ancient stones and mountain songs. His scales shimmered, not with fire, but with light caught from twilight skies, hues of pearl grey, ember gold, and soft, breathing blue. His wings were folded neatly, like scrolls, marked with constellations that no one had named in centuries. He did not guard treasure. He did not breathe flame. He dreamed, and in his dreams, he remembered everything the world had let slip. Tonight, Lorianth lay curled beneath the boughs of the moonvine tree, the last of its kind, with leaves like lanterns and roots that hummed lullabies into the soil. A soft wind moved through the glade, stirring the glowing petals above him. A single vine had curled around his horn as he slept, as if the tree sought comfort in his nearness. He stirred. Not from noise, there was none, but from feeling, like a thread pulled gently from the edge of an old tapestry. His eyes opened slowly, ageless and deep, not reptilian, not fierce, just calm. The stars above blinked lazily, as though recognizing him. "It is time again," he said aloud, though no creature was near enough to hear. He unfolded his great limbs, slow and deliberate, like a mountain waking from snow. The air shimmered where his breath met it, not with heat, but with memory. Images formed in the mist, a child once lost in the forest, a song sung to a dying star, the face of a deer who had once lain beside him in the rain. Lorianth rose. The world was calling, not with words, but with forgetting, the kind that came slowly, gently, like the tide erasing footprints from the shore. Something had frayed in the weave again. He felt it in the soil, in the rhythm of the air, in the silence between the stars. He stretched his wings, not to fly, but to feel. And there it was, a tug, a distant ember, flickering, calling. "Then I shall go," he rumbled, more to the wind than to himself. He bowed to the moonvine tree, its leaves brushing against his snout like a mother's hand, and with a sigh that stirred the moss into swirls, Lorianth began to walk, not through the sky, but along the forest paths where dreams took root and old threads waited to be remembered. Part 2. The Stream That Sang in Reverse. The forest whispered as Lorianth moved, not in fear or awe, but in quiet recognition. The roots shifted aside for his claws. The ferns leaned just slightly, brushing against his scales like old friends, remembering a forgotten song. And through the hush of moss and branch, a sound began to rise, soft, like a lullaby, hummed backward. It was the stream. A narrow ribbon of silver water that curved through the trees like a painted thread. Lorianth knew it well. He had followed it many times across the centuries, for it did not flow forward as streams normally do, nor even truly backward. It sang in reverse. The water itself was clear, but in its ripples shimmered images of moments not yet come, not predictions, not prophecy, just possibilities. And tonight, the stream sang louder than he remembered. Lorianth lowered his great head toward the surface. The reflection that looked back was not his own. It was a young child, cloaked in starlight, walking across sand with bare feet, holding something glowing in her palms. Her face was gentle, but determined, eyes wide with wonder. "She's part of it," he murmured. He did not know her name, but her light was familiar. Behind the child's image, the stream shimmered again, and a new shape appeared, a spire, crooked and tall, made from obsidian and dewoven vines. From its windows drifted small motes of golden smoke that curled upward into the night. Lorianth recognized the place. "The spindle spire," he rumbled. A memory stirred. Long ago, when dreams still had weight and the moon had not yet grown tired, the spindle spire had been a place of weaving, not cloth, but stories. Threads of truth and myth knotted gently together, keeping the sky from unraveling. And now it pulsed again, like a heartbeat deep in the earth. Lorianth dipped the tip of one claw into the water. The stream stilled, and then it pulled back, not in fear, but in welcome, revealing a hidden path beneath its surface, a trail of glowing stones that curved through the forest floor, a trail no creature could see without offering a memory in return. He stood tall and silent, then closed his eyes. "Take this one," he whispered, and from his breath a single ember floated down, tiny, glowing, weightless. It drifted to the stream and touched its surface, vanishing without a sound. The path revealed itself, softly glowing, waiting. Lorianth stepped forward. Each claw pressed gently against the stones, which pulsed beneath his weight, guiding him deeper into the forest, where the sky grew wider and the air began to remember things even the stars had forgotten. Part 3. The Hollow of Unfinished Songs. The path glowed with a quiet rhythm, not a light that shone outward, but one that pulsed inward, guiding Lorianth more by memory than by sight. As he walked, the trees thinned, giving way to tall stalks of silvergrass and wide mushrooms with soft, breathing gills. And then the forest opened. A shallow valley stretched before him, cupped gently between two hills like hands folded in prayer. The ground was smooth and dark, littered with smooth stones and the bones of old instruments. Harps without strings, flutes snapped in half, drums whose skins had long since faded into the wind. This was the hollow of unfinished songs. Lorianth paused at its edge, lowering his head, not out of sorrow, but respect. This was not a graveyard. It was a waiting room, a place where half-born melodies and forgotten tunes lingered, echoing faintly beneath the surface like fish beneath still water. The wind carried soft notes, not music, but the shadows of music, whispers of what might have been. He stepped forward. The moment his claw touched the valley floor, the bones of the old instruments began to shimmer, not with light, but with sound. Not notes, not rhythm, but intention. A breath held, a hum unspoken. Then came the voices, soft, faint, familiar, children's lullabies never finished, a mother's tune interrupted by tears, a bard's ballad that lost its way in silence. All these songs drifted like fireflies around Lorianth's wings, not asking to be remembered, only to be heard. "I remember you," he said gently, and with those words, the hollow stirred. A single thread of golden mist rose from the center of the field, spinning upward like smoke from a candle. It twined in the air, drawing close to his snout. He inhaled, not with breath, but with presence, and took the memory inside. It hummed in his chest like a second heartbeat. He turned, and behind him, one of the broken harps had reformed, not whole, not perfect, but waiting. "Another song will finish you one day," he rumbled kindly. The valley quieted again. The path ahead flickered. No longer the soft, glowing stones of the stream, but a trail of feathers caught in moonlight, floating just above the grass. A sign. "The winged librarian," he murmured. Another thread, another keeper of the old. He spread his wings slightly, not to fly, but to feel the current shift. The feathers drifted forward, beckoning him deeper into the sleeping lands, where even forgotten stories still dreamed of being told. Part 4. The Winged Librarian. The feathers shimmered with pale moonlight as they drifted ahead of Lorianth, guiding him over the low hills and into a grove shaped like a spiral. Trees leaned inward here, not unnaturally, but as if drawn by gravity, toward something sacred in the center. The deeper he walked into the spiral, the quieter the world became. Even his own footsteps softened. Each feather that floated down became part of the path, resting briefly on the earth before vanishing into it, like pages returning to a book. And then, in the very heart of the spiral, stood a structure unlike any other. It was not a tower, it was not a tree, it was a blend of both. a great open library shaped from living wood and stone, its branches woven into high arches, its walls lined with shelves that spiraled endlessly upward and downward. From within came the sound of rustling pages, but no voices, no footsteps, no breath, just thought made visible. A soft fluttering approached. Lorianth lifted his head as a figure descended gently from above. She was not human nor beast. Her wings were not feathers, but paper, pages inscribed with ink so old it had faded into texture. Her robes were stitched from bookmarks and ribbons. Her face was not unkind, but unreadable, like a story only half understood. This was the winged librarian. She hovered a moment before landing, silent as mist. Then she bowed. Lorianth returned the gesture, lowering his head until his horns brushed the ground. "You remember me," he said. "I remember all who carry flame," she replied, her voice as soft as turning parchment. She raised her hand, and a book floated from a nearby shelf. Its cover was blank. Its pages were empty. "Another ember is at risk," she said. "Another thread frays. This tale does not yet have a teller." Lorianth stepped forward. "Show me." She opened the book, not with fingers but with will. The pages turned slowly, then stopped on one filled with golden dust. As the dust cleared, an image took shape. A mountaintop beneath a bleeding moon, and at its peak, a hollowed crown of obsidian. Beneath the crown lay something glowing. Not a jewel, not a star. A spark, barely alive. The librarian closed the book. "It is not fire that fades, but meaning," she said. "The spark must be named, or it will vanish forever." Lorianth nodded slowly. "And the child?" "She has begun her journey. She does not yet know what she carries." The dragon exhaled, a warm, low breath that stirred dust from every shelf. "Then I must find her, before the unmakers do." The librarian stepped back and lifted a feathered hand. A scroll unrolled from one wing, glowing softly with a trail, not of ink, but of intent. "Follow the crownless wind," she whispered. "It remembers where the fire last wept." And just like that, she vanished. Not in a flash, but in a slow unwinding, like a sentence reaching its final period. Lorianth turned toward the trail of light, now curling out of the spiral grove, and he walked, not quickly, but with purpose. Each step gathering memory, each breath lighting the air, each moment bringing him closer to a spark that might save more than fire. Part 5. The Crownless Wind. The trail led upward, winding through silver meadows and narrow stone passes. The air began to thin and sharpen, touched by the altitude and by something older. The weight of ancient memory pressed into the rocks. Lorianth's steps slowed, not out of weariness, but reverence. The ground here had not been walked upon in many seasons, perhaps centuries. Moss covered most of the stones, and where it didn't, strange markings peeked through, not letters but spirals and notches, etched into the earth as if carved by the wind itself. It was here, high above the forest, that the crownless wind began to stir. Lorianth first felt it as a change in rhythm, the steady breath of the land suddenly skipping a beat. Then came the sigh, soft and long, brushing through his scales like fingertips across old parchment. It smelled of lost fires and wilted laurels, a wind that once wore a crown of flame and lost it. He reached a ledge where the sky opened wide and the valley stretched far below like a green tapestry. And there, poised like a sentinel against the sky, was an ancient arch of blackened stone, half sunk into the slope. Beneath it, the wind howled, not loud, but lonely, like a monarch who forgot the sound of their own name. Lorianth stepped beneath the arch. The moment he did, the wind surged. It did not push him back. It wrapped around him and whispered, "Do you still carry the ember, fireborn?" The voice wasn't a voice. It was the movement of air through the hollowed bones of kings and queens, through burned temples and empty halls. Lorianth answered, not aloud, but in breath. He exhaled slowly, and from his mouth drifted a single golden spark. The wind caught it, spun it, cradled it, and then wept. A soft drizzle fell from a sky where no cloud had gathered. Not rain, but memory. Drops that shimmered with the glint of old crowns, fallen dreams, and names forgotten by all but stone. The dragon closed his eyes. "I seek the child who walks with fire," he said into the wind. "She climbs the broken range," the wind replied, "past the bones of the Ashwood kings, toward the mount of hollow fire. She does not yet know what she carries. And if she does not learn," the wind warned, "the last ember will go out with her final breath." Lorianth opened his eyes. The wind circled him once more, and in its dance it lifted small fragments of charcoal from the ground, forming briefly the image of a girl walking through flame, unburned. "Then I must reach her before the fire sleeps for good," he said. The wind shivered once, and a new path opened, a rift in the mountain wall, narrow and steep, lit only by veins of emberstone that glowed faintly with the memory of old furnaces. Lorianth stepped into it, and the wind, crownless but not forgotten, followed behind. Part 6. The Mount of Hollow Fire. The rift in the mountain narrowed, then widened again into a basin of scorched stone and sleeping ash. High peaks circled it like silent sentinels, and at the heart of the basin rose a mound that pulsed faintly with red veins, each one glowing like a buried coal still remembering what it meant to burn. This was the Mount of Hollow Fire. It had not erupted in millennia. It did not roar or rumble. It waited. And at its summit, tucked between stone ribs and broken rings of obsidian, sat the hollowed crown the wind had spoken of. Lorianth approached slowly. The air here was thick, not with smoke or heat, but with history. Every breath he took stirred old embers beneath the crust, and with each step, he felt the memories rise to meet him. Flickers of roaring flame, of drakes born in molten pools, of voices chanting in a forgotten tongue. The crown itself was blackened and fractured, shaped not like a king's regalia, but like a nest of coals bound in wire, still warm, still whispering. And just below it, half buried in ash and glowing softly through the soot, was a spark. It pulsed, faintly, irregularly, but alive. Lorianth knelt. He did not reach for it immediately. Instead, he watched, waited. The spark flickered again, and this time, he saw within it the face of the child, the same girl he'd seen in the stream, walking, alone, her hands glowing as if carrying something she didn't understand. "She's touched it," he murmured. "She's taken part of the fire into herself. But fire cannot be held blindly. Not forever." He extended one claw and gently brushed the ash aside. The spark shimmered in recognition, not of him, but of his memory. He exhaled long and deep, and from his breath came not flame, but emberlight, gentle, warm, steady. It wrapped around the spark like a blanket, and the two pulsed in sync. For a moment, the mountain hummed, not loudly, but with relief. Lorianth closed his eyes. "She will need this part of you," he said softly. "When the paths break, when the light fades." He pressed one talon gently to the spark. It rose into the air, slow, weightless, and drifted toward him. But before it could touch his chest, it split in two. Half of it vanished into the wind, carried away along the ridge. "To her," he said. The other half nestled beneath a scale near his heart. He stood. The crown above him cracked slightly, a soft sound like a fire sighing. And from the broken space between its ribs, a new trail formed in the air. Not of smoke, not of light, but of scent. Lilac, char, pine, the scent of her trail. "She's not far now," he said. And with the mountain's warmth at his back, Lorianth turned to follow the path of scent through the peaks toward the girl with the fire in her hands and the last ember yet to awaken. Part 7. The Girl with Emberlight Hands. She walked alone through the valley of broken roots. Her name was Aera, though she didn't remember where it had come from. It felt given rather than chosen. A name whispered to her in dreams, or pulled from the wind by the trees. She carried no map, no compass, and no memory of how she'd arrived at the edge of the world. But in her hands, she carried light, not fire, not flame, emberlight. It flickered softly between her cupped palms, warm, not hot, and always changing color. Sometimes it was golden orange like sunrise, other times pale blue like frost touched by moonlight. It pulsed in rhythm with her breath, and sometimes, when she was still, it echoed a heartbeat that didn't seem to be hers. She didn't know what it was, only that it had appeared 3 nights ago, after she woke beside the silent river, her boots soaked, and a song she'd never heard still caught in her throat. She hadn't meant to take it. It had simply followed her. And now it hummed, especially when she neared the trees with cracked bark and the stones that glowed faintly beneath moss. Especially when the wind carried with it the scent of warm ash and old stories. Aera paused beside a fallen log wrapped in silver lichen. She sat, the emberlight resting between her hands, like a small, drowsy animal. She stared into it. "What are you?" she asked quietly. The light rippled, and for just a moment, it showed her a face, not her own. Large, scaled, eyes like starlight through smoke. A dragon. Her breath caught, then the image faded. The emberlight blinked softly, like it had fallen back asleep. Aera looked up. Across the valley, where the wind curved between 2 narrow peaks, she saw movement. Slow, deliberate, vast. Not threatening, but present. The ground beneath her boots thrummed faintly, like a drum remembering how to beat. She stood. She did not feel afraid. She felt expected. The emberlight stirred in her hands again, and a gentle thread of warmth ran up her arms, into her chest, where something ancient began to recognize itself. She walked, not hurriedly, but with purpose. The wind curled around her like a ribbon. Leaves lifted, dust circled, and far ahead, hidden between mist and time, a dragon began to descend. Not from the sky, but from memory. Part 8. When Dragon Meets Flame. The air shimmered where the ridges narrowed, a quiet place between sky and stone, where few ever wandered. Mist clung to the slopes like silk, and the sun filtered through in soft ribbons, painting the earth in faded gold. Lorianth moved without haste, his great body barely making a sound. His wings were tucked close, his steps light despite his size. The ember, nestled in his chest, beat gently, guiding him, not with direction, but with awareness, a sense of nearness, like 2 stars drifting slowly into orbit. He felt her before he saw her. A presence, small but bright, familiar yet unfinished. Then, through the thinning mist, she came into view. A girl, slender, wild-haired, wrapped in a cloak far too large for her. She walked with care, not like someone afraid, but like someone listening with her whole body. Between her hands glowed the emberlight, steady now, reflecting in her wide eyes. She stopped when she saw him, not frozen, not gasping, simply still. Lorianth halted, lowering his head slightly to meet her gaze. A long silence settled, and then, "You're real," she said softly. He rumbled in response, a low, warm sound that echoed across the stones. "And you carry what was nearly lost." She looked down at the emberlight between her palms. It pulsed once, as if responding to his voice. When she looked up again, her eyes were damp. "It came to me. I don't know how, but I can feel it. It's alive." Lorianth stepped forward slowly, careful not to stir the wind too harshly. When he was close enough, he knelt, bringing his face level with hers. His breath smelled faintly of warm moss, burnt cedar, and something older, like the scent of books never read. "It remembers you," he said. "I don't remember it," she whispered. "That doesn't matter. It shows you, as you are." The emberlight stirred between them, and for a moment it reached, a thread of glow stretching from her hands towards his chest, where the other half of the ember resided. They pulsed in tandem, syncing like twin hearts rediscovering their rhythm. Aera blinked. "It was broken, wasn't it?" Lorianth nodded. "Split to protect it, hidden in pieces. But the world is thinning now. The unmaking begins where light forgets its name. And I'm supposed to stop that. You are meant to carry the ember forward. That is enough." She lowered her hands. The ember floated between them now, unheld, balanced on the breath of the air. Lorianth extended one great claw, not to touch, but to gesture. Behind her, a new path had begun to open, winding, uncertain, shimmering with the light of choices not yet made. "Will you walk it?" he asked. Aera turned, looked, then nodded. Not out of certainty, but of courage, the kind that flickers like flame and refuses to go out. Part 9. The Path of Flickering Truths. The path was unlike any Aera had seen. It didn't wind through meadows or forests. It wasn't cut into the stone or marked by signs. It shimmered, flickering just above the ground like heat waves on sun-warmed earth. With each step she took, it became more visible beneath her feet, revealing symbols etched in faint gold, spirals, starbursts, tiny runes that pulsed like heartbeats. Lorianth walked beside her, silent and steady. They moved as if through a painting still being finished, the world forming around them with each step. First mist, then light, then shape. Sometimes the trees whispered their names. Sometimes the ground seemed to hum beneath their steps. The emberlight hovered between them, no longer clutched in Aera's hands, but drifting on its own, as if it trusted her now. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "To the weavers," Lorianth replied. "They remember what the stars forget." "Will they tell me what to do?" "They will show you what has already begun." They crossed a shallow creek where the water flowed uphill in silence. Aera paused at its edge, watching her reflection blur and shift. For a moment she saw herself older, eyes deeper, shoulders straighter, hair streaked with silver light. But then the image blinked and faded. "Is that my future?" she asked, almost afraid to look at Lorianth. "One thread of it," he said. "The path doesn't promise, it only offers." She nodded, though she didn't quite understand. The words settled in her mind like seeds that might bloom later. Far ahead, the path turned, leading toward a grove of trees that shimmered with shifting bark, sometimes willow, sometimes pine, sometimes something far stranger. The wind carried sounds that weren't quite music, but not quite silence either. A language without words, a story without telling. Aera slowed. This place feels awake. It is, Lorianth said. Everything here remembers. As they stepped into the grove, the air thickened, not with weight, but with possibility. The trees leaned close, their branches forming archways of woven light, and in the center of the grove stood 3 tall figures, draped in robes made of star thread and memory moss. The weavers. Their faces were hidden behind veils of shifting mist. In their hands, they held long needles of bone and copper, which they used to stitch unseen threads into the air. They did not speak, but their voices were felt, directly in the mind. You bring the ember. You bring the dragon. And you bring the unraveling. Aera stepped forward, unsure if she should bow or speak or simply breathe. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. But I think I want to learn. One of the weavers moved closer and gently placed a hand near her forehead, not touching but close enough that the air between them crackled softly. Then we shall show you. Aera closed her eyes, and the grove spun with light and thread and the memory of a flame that had nearly forgotten its name. Part 10. The Thread of Becoming. The world tilted, not with motion, but with meaning. Aera stood still, though her feet no longer touched the ground. The grove had vanished. So had the dragon. So had the trees and sky and path. In their place, a canvas of darkness, vast and endless, punctuated by glimmering lines of silver thread that stretched in all directions. It was not space. It was not void. It was the weave, the place where everything began. Around her, the weavers moved like echoes given shape. Their hands danced through the threads, not weaving so much as listening, coaxing each strand into alignment, letting it find its own shape again. Each soul is a thread, one whispered, though not with sound, and each thread is a story. Yours is unraveling. Aera looked down and saw it, a single golden thread running from her chest, frayed at the end, its glow flickering like a candle in a storm. It trembled as if caught between 2 winds. Why is it breaking? She asked. Because your ember is not yet whole. From the distance, 2 other threads shimmered faintly, one pulsing warmly from where Lorianth would be, and another, thinner, stranger, veiled in shadow. You must choose how to bind the ember within you, said the second weaver. What it becomes and what it awakens is yours to shape. Aera's breath caught. She felt something forming just behind her, the warmth of wings, the scent of ash and starlight. Lorianth was not here, not really, but the memory of him was, and it stood beside her like a steady mountain. How do I choose? She whispered. The third weaver extended a hand, revealing 3 small orbs of thread, each glowing differently. One blazed gold, bright and hot, humming with power. One shimmered silver, cool and gentle, humming with grace. One pulsed with deep red, low and slow, humming with truth. "These are not paths," the weaver said. "They are truths. Each will change you." Aera reached out instinctively, but then paused. The emberlight in her chest responded, flickering, uncertain, reaching in 3 directions at once. "Do I have to pick one?" she asked. The weavers did not answer. Instead, the threads around her began to move again, winding gently into a loose braid, one that looked fragile but held shape. And in the center of the braid, a hollow, a space for a choice yet to be made. Aera understood. Not now, but soon. The weave was still forming. She stepped forward, and the world began to fold gently around her, the threads pulling back into the grove, the weavers dissolving into mist, the sky stitching itself above the trees once more. Lorianth stood where she had left him, still and waiting. "You saw?" he asked. She nodded. "And?" "I saw what I could become," she said, "and what I must hold together." The emberlight in her chest now glowed more steadily, not brighter but deeper, like a coal learning to be a hearth. And somewhere far across the range, a new tremor stirred in the world, small, dark, and watching. Part 11. The Watcher in the Veil of Smoke. They travelled in silence now, not because words failed, but because something in the air had changed. The wind no longer whistled softly between the trees. It stilled. Birds had grown quiet. The glow of the emberlight dimmed slightly, not in fear, but in caution, like a flame drawing closer to shadow. They had entered the veil of smoke. It wasn't smoke in the normal sense, not from fire or burning wood. It was older, wiser. A low, silver-grey mist that drifted across the ground in tendrils, clinging to roots and stone like it remembered the things buried beneath them. Lorianth paused at the ridge. He leaned down close to Aera, his voice low and steady. "There is something that watches here, a thing that feeds not on fire, but on forgetting." "Can it harm us?" she asked, tightening her cloak. "Only if you forget who you are." She nodded, clutching the emberlight to her chest as they stepped down into the veil. The mist curled around them. It made shapes, vague, fleeting illusions that danced at the corners of Aera's vision. She saw things: her old cottage, her mother's smile, a lantern left swinging on a hook, and just as she reached out, they vanished. "Memories," she whispered. "Echoes," Lorianth corrected. "Left behind by others who passed through and could not hold on." As they walked deeper, the mist thickened. Even Lorianth's great form seemed to fade into the fog, his outline reduced to moving shadows. The only thing that held steady was the glow of Aera's emberlight, now pulsing in time with her heart. Then she saw it, not clearly, but distinctly. A tall figure in the mist, unmoving, head tilted, cloak trailing like smoke. Its face was hidden behind a mask shaped like a raven's beak, etched with runes that crawled faintly, as if alive. The Watcher. It stood not to block the path, but to observe. Aera stopped walking. The emberlight flared briefly, then steadied. "Do not speak first," Lorianth said from the mist. "Let it measure you. Let it see your thread." The Watcher raised one hand, long fingers wrapped in smoke and bone. It pointed to Aera's chest, to the ember. And then it bowed, just slightly, then turned and walked away. The mist parted behind it, revealing a staircase of stone carved into the hillside, winding up toward a ridge laced with twisted trees and glinting glass-like rock. "What just happened?" Aera breathed. "You were weighed," Lorianth said, and remembered. They climbed the steps. As they rose, the mist thinned, and Aera could feel the ember within her burning more confidently now, not afraid, not hiding, but aware. At the top of the ridge, she looked back down into the vale. The Watcher was gone, but its presence remained, not threatening, but warning. There were things in the world that would try to unmake her, but so long as a flame burned true, they would pass like smoke in wind. Part 12. The Garden of Quiet Fire. Beyond the ridge, the air changed once more, not in temperature, but in tone. It shimmered softly, like the stillness after a deep breath. The land opened into a hollow cradled by smooth hills, filled with a gentle radiance that pulsed not from sun or moon, but from the ground itself. They had reached the Garden of Quiet Fire. Aera stepped into it slowly, her boots sinking just slightly into moss that glowed faintly with warm hues. Deep orange, soft lavender, and flickering pearl. All around her, delicate stalks swayed with no wind. Blossoms opened and closed like sleeping hearts. Stones were arranged in quiet circles, each centered with a small eternal flame no taller than her thumb. "This place feels alive," she said in a whisper. "It is," Lorianth replied. "Every fire here was once a thought that burned too bright to fade." The dragon moved gently between the circles of light, his massive form reverent and precise. The flames did not fear him. In fact, as he passed, a few rose slightly as if greeting him. Aera knelt beside one of the circles. The flame inside it didn't flicker randomly. It breathed, in and out, in and out. She reached out her hand and hovered it just above the light. It didn't burn, it didn't chill. It simply was, a perfect warmth, neither consuming nor demanding. "These are memories," she murmured. "These are truths," Lorianth corrected. "Ones that no longer needed to be spoken, only kept." She looked around. Dozens, no, hundreds of flames, each resting, each waiting. Some burned with a steady glow of resolve. Others shimmered with heartbreak or wonder or forgotten promises. And yet all of them hummed in harmony, like a choir of silent voices. Lorianth turned to her. "Yours is not ready to rest here," he said gently. "But it will one day, if you carry it well." "Will I place it here?" she asked. "When my story's done?" The dragon nodded once. "If your flame remembers itself through all things, through shadow, silence, and sorrow, then yes, it will join the garden." She stood, feeling both comforted and humbled. Around her, the air seemed to hold its breath. The emberlight within her chest echoed the garden's pulse, a quiet fire of its own. Still young, still learning. And then, a shift. Not in the garden, but beyond it. The wind tilted. The trees along the rim of the hollow rustled not with a breeze, but with a message. Something had awakened. Something that had noticed them. "We should go," Lorianth said, his tone steady but edged. "The quiet fire protects, but it cannot shield forever." Aera gave one last glance at the sleeping flames. "I'll come back," she promised. One of the flames near her dipped slightly, like a nod. Then they left the garden, stepping through a curtain of hanging moss that shimmered as they passed. And far behind them, where fire slept without smoke, a single blossom bloomed in their wake, glowing soft gold and flickering with a new rhythm. Part 13. The Harrowed Sky. They left the garden of quiet fire behind. The sky above them began to change. It didn't darken with clouds or storms. Instead, it cracked. Not physically, but in feeling. The blue softened to a worn grey, and fine silver lines etched across the heavens like fractures in old glass. Stars that should not have been visible during daybreak began to blink through, cold and watching. They had entered the reach of the harrowed sky. Lorianth slowed, raising his head toward the celestial rift above them. "It watches now," he said. "What does?" Aera asked, clutching her cloak tighter as a strange breeze stirred her hair. "The ones who unmake," he replied. "They do not walk the land, they walk the spaces between belief, where story fails, where flame forgets." Aera followed his gaze upward. The cracks in the sky weren't simply above, they ran deep, revealing glimpses of impossible constellations that shifted when she looked directly at them. Shapes formed and dissolved, a serpent coiled around a dying moon, a tower sinking into fog, an eye blinking once then closing forever. The ember in her chest flared briefly. She gasped, steadying herself as warmth surged through her limbs. For a moment, she wasn't standing in a clearing. She was falling, spiraling through a sky where gravity made no promises. Then, Lorianth's wing shielded her. The moment passed. She looked up, dazed. What was that? "A test," Lorianth said. "They search for your unraveling. They press against your thread, waiting to see if it frays." Aera clenched her fists, steadying her breath. "I'm not ready," she admitted. "No one ever is," Lorianth rumbled. "But readiness is not what holds the ember, only remembrance." As they continued, the path narrowed between stone ridges carved with symbols that flickered dimly, old protections, weakened by time and doubt. The land around them felt stretched thin, as though it too was waiting for something to go wrong. In the distance, a chime rang out. Once, twice, 3 times. Soft, hollow notes that carried not on air, but on thought. Lorianth paused, then turned his gaze to the east. The tolling tower still stands. What does it toll for? Aera asked. For stories nearing their end, he said, or those that refuse to. They walked toward the sound. Each toll of the bell echoed in her chest like a heartbeat she didn't yet understand. The ember light flared with each one, not brighter, but firmer, as if it were being hammered into shape. Above them, the harrowed sky shuddered once more, but did not break. Not yet. Part 14. The Tolling Tower. The bell tolled again, low and somber, and the sound spilled across the hills like slow-moving thunder. It didn't ring in alarm, nor in joy. It rang like a question waiting for an answer. Aera and Lorianth crested a rise, and there, silhouetted against the fractured sky, stood the tolling tower. It was impossibly tall. Constructed of dark, spiraled stone that flickered with half-remembered reflections, its surface was covered in glowing runes and slowly spinning mirrors. Some were cracked, some were empty, some showed impossible images, rain falling upward, wolves flying in silence, a boy made of candle wax writing letters to the moon. The tower did not lean, it listened. A single bell hung at its peak, swaying not with wind, but with will. Every chime echoed down the spine of the land, touching all who still carried story, especially those whose threads were fraying. As Aera drew near, the ember in her chest grew warm, and a faint, unfamiliar tension pressed against her thoughts. Lorianth noticed. The tower sees the truth, he said. It does not judge, but it remembers all. Aera's footsteps slowed as they reached the base. No door, no handle, just a smooth surface until she stepped closer and a seam appeared. Thin light traced a spiral and the stone slowly parted, revealing a narrow passage lined with mirrors on either side. She hesitated. Will I see myself? Only as you've forgotten, Lorianth replied. She stepped inside. The mirrors reflected not her body, but moments, her first steps beside the stream, the fear she swallowed when her father vanished, the day she woke to find the emberlight in her hands. Some reflections showed truths she had never spoken aloud. Others showed paths she might have taken. Cruel words she nearly said, kindnesses she failed to offer. At the far end of the hall stood a single mirror, larger than the rest. It showed her standing in a burned field, alone, ash swirling around her. But even in the ruin, her emberlight still burned, small, trembling, but alive. She reached out, and the mirror rippled like water. A voice echoed through the chamber. You carry flame where others fell silent. You hold a thread not meant to bear alone, but you have not broken. The bell tolled again. This time, Aera heard not warning, but invitation. The mirror shimmered, then vanished, revealing a small platform where a single object rested on a stone pedestal. A needle, long and smooth, forged from starlight and sorrow. It pulsed faintly, waiting. Take it, said Lorianth, standing just behind her now. You'll need it to stitch what the world has torn. She reached out and grasped the needle, It was warm, familiar, and as she held it, the emberlight in her chest spiraled around her arm like a ribbon of flame, wrapping once around the needle before settling back inside her. The bell rang one final time, clear, strong, and above them, the harrowed sky paused. For the first time since it cracked, it seemed to hesitate, as if uncertain whether to break or mend. Aera turned toward the opening sky. "Let's keep going," she said. Lorianth nodded, and together they stepped beyond the tolling tower, deeper into the threads of fate, where story, fire, and choice would soon meet. Part 15. Where Threads Converge. They walked beneath a trembling sky, where stars bled silver and the clouds carried stories instead of rain. The land began to fold inward, as if the world itself was drawing breath. Hills sloped toward a basin at the heart of the realm, a hollow known in few tongues by one name: Convergence. It was not marked on any map, but all threads led here eventually. The path narrowed into an ancient causeway made of woven stone and old bones. Glimmering fibers of light stretched across it, binding the stones together, not physically, but spiritually, each one resonating with an echo of a choice once made. Aera held the starlit needle tightly in one hand. In her chest, the emberlight now pulsed in rhythm with her steps. It had grown more complex, not louder or brighter, but richer, layered, like a song slowly learning its harmony. Lorianth walked beside her, wings folded close, his eyes trained on the horizon. Ahead, rising from the basin's center like a tree of light and shadow, stood the loom of echoes. It was unlike anything Aera had ever seen, part sculpture, part storm, part breath. Threads spun in the air around it like comet trails. Some drifted gently, others sparked as they crossed paths, igniting memories and visions before dissolving again. "This is where the world's story binds itself," Lorianth said softly. "And unbinds?" Aera asked. "Yes, if it must." They reached the edge of the basin, where soft white grass rose to their knees. The moment Aera stepped into it, the threads shifted. The loom shuddered. A tremor moved through the weave, subtle but felt in every bone. The moment had come, not an ending, but a turning. From behind the loom stepped three figures, not the weavers she had met before. These were older, stranger. Their forms flickered between solid and spectral, their eyes glowing like the hollow ends of burnt candles. They spoke in one voice. "The thread-bearer comes." Aera stepped forward. "I don't know everything," she said. "I'm still learning, but I carry what I can. I carry what others dropped." She lifted the needle. It shimmered like a falling star, and the emberlight flowed through it, forming a small flame at its tip. "Will you bind what is frayed?" they asked. "I will try." The loom responded. It unfurled one long, frayed thread, a broken strand trembling at the edges of light and dark. Aera instinctively knew it wasn't just her story, it was many. Lives lived and lost, songs never sung, hopes never held. She saw flashes, a city swallowed by doubt, a child born of silence, a fire left untended. "They left too soon," she whispered. "Then finish what they began," Lorianth said behind her, his voice steady. She threaded the needle and she began to stitch. Not with hands, not even with skill, but with memory, with breath, with presence. Not with hands, not even with skill, but with memory, with breath, with presence. Each pass of the needle pulled light back into the thread. Each stitch whispered names that had long gone unspoken. As she worked, the loom pulsed brighter, stronger, not glowing, but remembering. Lorianth raised his head and roared, not in rage or warning, but in celebration. The harrowed sky above began to knit itself closed, the cracks shrinking, the stars steadying. And in the weave, a new thread formed, bright, strange, alive. Aera stepped back, exhausted, fulfilled, changed. The loom bowed gently, and the spectral guardians vanished like dusk. Lorianth approached her and touched his snout to her shoulder. "You've mended more than thread," he said. "I didn't do it alone. You never had to." They stood in silence at the center of the world, where stories touched, where endings turned, where flame became future. Part 16. The Light That Was Carried. The loom of echoes shimmered in stillness now. Its pulse softened to a quiet rhythm, steady, like a deep breath taken after long silence. The threads danced gently in the air, weaving on their own, like a great wheel set back into motion. But not all was finished. Aera stepped away from the loom, the starlit needle in her hand still warm. The emberlight inside her pulsed calmly, no longer frantic or searching. It had grown roots, it had settled. Lorianth watched her. There was pride in his gaze, but more than that, trust. "It is not over, is it?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Lorianth said. "The weaving holds for now, but echoes are not chains. They fade if not walked." She looked toward the horizon. The world beyond the basin shimmered faintly. A new path, unwritten. It called, not with urgency, but with invitation. "Others will need to remember." "Yes," he said. "Not all flames are reborn by chance. Some must be lit again by hand." She felt the truth of that settle deep into her chest. Aera had once wandered alone, unsure of who she was, or why a flame had chosen her. Now she understood. Not completely, but clearly enough to take the next step. The ember she carried was not a relic. It was a seed, and her journey was not about power, or destiny, or ancient dragons. It was about keeping the flame lit, in her, in others, in the forgotten places. Behind them, the loom spun a final thread and gently folded in on itself, becoming no larger than a seed pod. It drifted toward Aera and landed in her open hand. She looked at it with awe. "A gift?" she asked. "A beginning," Lorianth replied. They turned. Together, they walked beyond the edge of the basin, back into a world still cracked, still trembling, but awakening. The sky, though faintly scarred, now bore the early warmth of a sunrise, and somewhere, in distant hills, a fire was being kindled, not large, not loud, but true. And as long as the flame was carried, in hands, in breath, in memory, the story would continue, not as prophecy, not as legend, but as life. Part 17. Ash and Blossom. The hills beyond the basin unfurled like a quiet sigh, soft, endless, touched by the fading starlight of a mended sky. Where once the air had carried the scent of ash and silence, it now smelled of soil after rain and something almost sweet, like fruit blooming in a forgotten orchard. Aera walked beside Lorianth without speaking. She didn't need to. The emberlight within her chest still glowed, not as a beacon anymore, but as a companion, steady, warm, content. It was no longer searching for a home, it was home. Ahead, the land sloped into a small valley wrapped in bramble and fog. Here they found ashes scattered across stone like the last breath of a great fire. The trees were blackened, leafless, their trunks split and hollowed, yet the roots still held firm in the earth, waiting. A fire was lost here, Lorianth said, his voice low with reverence. Can it grow again? Aera asked, kneeling to press her palm to the grey soil. The ashes shifted, and beneath them something shimmered, a small sprout, pale green, thin as a whisper, but alive. Aera smiled, brushing the ashes away with care. She could feel it, a pulse, slow and shy, rising from the earth like the echo of a dream, not ready to end. She pulled the tiny loom seed from her pouch and placed it gently at the base of the sprout. The emberlight wrapped around it like sunlight warming a windowsill. It glowed, and from that glow the sprout bloomed. Petals of copper and flame unfurled, shimmering with dew that sparkled like stardust. The roots stretched out, touching the ashen soil, and where they touched, life returned, not all at once, but like memory, slow, surprising, unstoppable. The trees whispered, their trunks cracked, not from breaking, but from healing. Tiny buds formed on the branches. The ash lifted gently into the air, caught on a wind that no longer mourned. A garden, Aera whispered. Born of loss, Lorianth said, but shaped by fire that chose not to die. They stood in silence as the blossoms spread. It was not a loud miracle. It did not sing or shine or announce itself, but it endured, and in that, it mattered. Lorianth turned to her, lowering his massive head. You carry the thread now, not just of story, but of place, of becoming. Then I'll carry it carefully, she said, and I'll pass it on. He exhaled, a warm breeze brushing through the young leaves. You are no longer just a bearer of flame. What am I then? Lorianth's eyes softened. A kindler. Part 18. The Last Ember and the First Dawn. The valley glowed in silence, not from the sun, not yet, but from the quiet radiance of renewal. The blossoms that had risen from ash now swayed in rhythms only the earth could hear. Each petal shimmered with emberlight, soft and subtle, like secrets the world was just beginning to remember. Aera stood at the center of it all. She no longer needed to ask questions. She no longer feared forgetting. The ember within her pulsed not in search of meaning, but in celebration of its own being. She was no longer carrying fire, she was fire. Lorianth stood nearby, silent and proud. He had known from the moment he first saw her, even before the ember chose her, that she was not like the others. She did not burn to destroy, she burned to illuminate, to guide, to warm. "The sun is coming," he said quietly. Aera looked to the horizon. The first threads of dawn stretched across the sky, golden and lavender. The harrowed sky had mended into something softer, still scarred, but honest. A sky that remembered it had once been broken and chose to shine anyway. She reached into her pouch and removed the starlit needle one last time. It shimmered faintly in her hand before dissolving into light, returning to the weave. No longer needed. She turned to Lorianth. "Will you stay?" she asked. The dragon lowered his head. "For a while, until the next bearer rises, until the ember needs to be carried again." Aera smiled. "Then I'll leave a trail of warmth." She stepped forward and placed her palm on his forehead. The emberlight passed between them, not in exchange, but in embrace. Dragon and kindler, keeper and flame, promise and path. Together they stood as the sun crested the hills. The world opened, the air hummed with potential. And in the valley of ash and blossom, under a mended sky, the last ember no longer flickered alone. It had become the first dawn.